Hi there, welcome to this month's Craft Collab event. This month we are sponsored by the Sweet and Sassy stamps. For today's video, I'm creating with this adorable stamp set called Winter Hugs, and I'm going to be combining these critters with an alcohol inked background winter scene. I'm using my Misti to help me stamp out all of the images. In that Misti, I have a piece of Neenah Solar White 80-pound cardstock, and I'm using Memento Tuxedo black ink to stamp all of these images out. I wasn't sure which ones I was going to use, so I decided just to stamp them all out and have them ready to go. So for my background, I've pulled out several shades of blue, purple, and pink of the Alcohol Pearl inks by Ranger. And I have a paper towel on my glass mat, and then I put down a piece of alcohol ink paper. This one I got from my local craft store, but I will link to a couple of different options down below. So this is the fun part of creating with alcohol inks. You kind of just get to play around. I've added some of the blue down onto my paper and a little bit of the pink, and then I'm just kind of taking the blending solution to get that ink to move. I also have an felt pad on an applicator tool that I'm using to kind of pounce in some of that ink to get it mixed. There's honestly no right or wrong way to do this. You're just kind of adding ink, adding some of the solution, and getting that ink to move either with an applicator tool like I'm using, or I've seen people blow air through a straw to get the ink to move. Once I have all of that on there, I do go ahead and add some of the white and silver mixative. So while my background is drying, I'm gonna color in all of the images that I stamped out earlier using my Copic markers. And I'll share how I color in just one of the bears and one of the penguins, because I basically colored them all in the same way. I do try to remember to leave the caps up, but occasionally I do forget. So I will have a list of all of the color combinations I used over on my blog, which I will link to down below. When I'm coloring in white images, I just add shading to certain parts of the image, and then I blend it out with at least a couple of shades lighter. And I still do leave most of the image uncolored so that it still gives the white look, but with some depth. So for the bears, I'm creating the bears' fur by flicking in the darkest color, which for me was a W2. Then I go back in over that and I add W1, and then I still blend that out further with a W00. And then I'll take out any harsh edges with the blender. I added some rosy cheeks on the bear with an R20 and an R000. And then I color in his nose and his bottom of his feet with just a black marker. For the penguin, I'm sticking to using the W family Copics, and I'm starting with the darkest, in the darkest area with a W9, followed by a W7 and a W5, and then a touch of W3 to blend that out. So while I finished coloring in, I want to mention that this is a Rafflecopter giveaway, and it's open worldwide. The winner will receive a $20 gift card from our sponsor, who is the Sweet and Sassy stamp. And I will have all of that information linked down below in the description area and how you can enter this giveaway. To finish coloring the white part of the penguin, I'm again going back to the light W Copic markers, and I'm using W2. I'm pulling in W1 and I think a touch of W00. For his beak and his little feet, I use YR04, and I use a touch of E33. And then I finish everything off by using a white gel pen to add a little bit of highlights. After I finished coloring up all of the images, I use my ScanNCut to cut them out, and then I can set them off to the side to work on the rest of the card. I decided to create a tall and skinny card in order to accommodate for all of those images. Since I could not decide which ones to use, I decided to use all of them. Here I have a piece of Neenah 110-pound cardstock, and I've cut it down to 9 by 8. And then I'm going to score the cardstock down at 4 inches to create a 9 by 4 card base. Now this will fit very nicely into a size 10 envelope. I created some snowy hills by die cutting white cardstock using Lawn Fawn's stitched Hillside borders die. And in order to get the piece to fit across my entire panel, I just die cut a long piece of cardstock without reaching the edge, and then I did it again, this time butting up the die where the first cut ended. Okay, so my alcohol ink background is dry, and I've cut it down to fit my card front. I'm taking this micro glaze by Tim Holtz. This is a type of a sealer, and this will seal the surface so that it will protect the ink underneath. And all I'm doing is I'm taking a foam blender applicator tool and dipping a little bit of that into the glaze, and then I just tap off the excess and I'm buffing in the sealer into my card front. And then again, I will just set that aside to dry. It just needs a few minutes before I can start adhering the components to the top. Okay, so at this point I'm ready to start adhering all of the components. I have my alcohol ink background, and I'm adhering it to the tall and skinny card base that I created earlier. I used a strong double-sided adhesive to adhere that, and then I'm just trimming off a little bit that's hanging off. And then I have my 2 snowy hills, and I've used a couple of bee markers to color in some shading to mimic snow. I'm just going to use liquid adhesive and directly adhere that to the background and trim off this little tiny piece that's hanging off. I'm using some Love from Lizzie peel-offs, which I've had in my stash for a long time, and these are basically just really thin black vinyl type stickers, and I think just adding them to the edge between the card base and the card front panel, I think it just finishes off the card nicely. The last thing that I need to do is to create my sentiment, and I'm using Versamark clear ink to stamp the sentiment out onto a piece of black cardstock. I've treated my cardstock with anti-static powder, and then I'm taking the sentiment from the stamp set, which reads, "It's never cold when you're around." And then I'm going to add white embossing powder and melt that with my heat tool. Using my trimmer, I trimmed down the sentiment strip And then I added a piece of fun foam to the back of it before I adhered it to the center of the card. So here I'm taking the little igloo that I colored earlier, and I'm adhering that directly to the background. And then I'm taking my focal point images, which I've popped up on little pieces of foam tape, and I'm kind of centering them where the polar bears are on the center of the card, and the rest of the images are on either side. And the last thing that I do to complete this card, I've taken my Copic marker in one of the blue shades and I've grounded the images. And then I'm taking a Spectrum Noir clear glitter overlay pen and I'm adding shimmer to all of the white parts of the critters, as well as touches to the snow. And that will complete my card featuring the Sassy, Sweet and Sassy stamps, Winter Hugs, on an alcohol ink background. Don't forget that this is a giveaway hop sponsored by the Sweet and Sassy Stamp Company with a prize of $20 to their shop. As always, I will have a link of all the products that I used below, as well as on my blog. The next participant on the hop is linked down below, so follow along to check out their projects. Thank you so much for stopping by, and I'll see you next time.